Okay, so still going with that general to specific approach, after blending the darker values that I added throughout the whole piece, now I'm going to tighten up kind of the softness of the blending by adding my B pencils on their point now in areas to kind of clean up edges so they're not so smudgy looking. And I'm working throughout the whole piece rather quickly, not as quick as it's filming here, but just tightening up edges of value. You can also use your eraser to lighten areas. If something seems like it's too dark compared to something else, go ahead and lighten it. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about accenting with my drawing. And so accenting is adding areas of contrast where highlights and shadows butt against each other. And so that comes into play a lot with the overlapping of the petals in my larger daffodil, and then also the overlapping of like the smaller daffodil over the larger daffodil. And so accenting, I'm gonna go ahead and you can kind of see I already started to here just add some darks kind of against, where this petal is behind this one. This petal is darker, it's in more of a shadow than this petal is. And this, at least the edge of this petal, is lighter. And so it pops forward because that light advances towards the camera, whereas the dark recedes. And so I want to make sure that I go in and I add that shadow right against the edge of this lighter petal. So I'm not putting any lines anywhere. I'm just shading the shadow right up to the edge. Now I can also pull out the highlight or just make this overall lighter on this petal as well. And so this is a spot where you can just lightly drag your white eraser. Certainly if you have a kneaded eraser, you can take the kneaded eraser and you can sculpt it into like the exact little point that you need and kind of like draw that, and that's just going to pick up some of the value. It's not going to pick up as much, but if you take your white plastic eraser and just gently kind of glide it over that area, you can kind of almost use it in the same way. The other thing that you can do is you can take a blending stump or a Q-tip. Those will all lift value away because they're rubbing against that and they're going to lift value away. You just have to be careful that you don't end up smudging any of the details that you've now put in. Okay, with this particular subject that I've chosen to draw, there's a lot of areas where like there's highlights on like the edges of the petals. And so if you have an eraser like this at home, that's, it's very helpful for that. But even like the back of a pencil eraser is nice and small to get into those areas as well. And just kind of erase those highlights out. But again, you can take a blending stump, and if you take if it's clean and go into that area, okay, or a clean Q-tip and go into that area, it's gonna lift some graphite away. Just be careful not to use these like on the point and like push them in. Okay, if you use a clean Q-tip in there, it will also lift some graphite away. And so I wanna go around and just kind of make things pop now. The thing that I really need to work on and make pop is this center of the daffodil, where it needs a lot of cleaning up and a lot of attention yet. You can see I kind of started to accent like the edges of shadows that I placed in there. I started kind of just like adding some more value over top now with the tip of my pencil, more so than the side of the pencil, and just cleaning up some of the smudges. Sometimes in these more like curly areas, I will kind of like use my pencil to follow the contour of how they curve. And this is an area that I really want to focus on and work hard on because it is my focal point area. It also pops forward in the composition and spatially against these petals in the background too. It like dimensionally is closer and has more contrast than those areas. And so to further my illusion of depth, I want to make sure that that has really a lot of tighter detail and contrast than the petals back here. It's a more important area. It's a closer area. It has more contrast, and it's the area that is the focal point. So I do have to kind of go in there and go in and kind of make sure that I make like the edges really pop against these petals, these larger petals in the background.